The gunshot that split the mountain silence didn't come from Quinn Everhart's rifle, and that was the first sign something had gone dangerously wrong in the high country above White River, South Dakota. Quinn dropped the elk haunch he'd been carrying and moved with practiced silence through the pines, his powerful frame cutting between trees like a shadow despite his considerable size. His dark hair hung past his shoulders, tied back with a leather cord that had seen better days. Muscles honed from years of trapping, hunting, and surviving in these Black Hills rippled beneath his buckskin shirt as he climbed higher toward the sound. He'd been alone up here for the better part of 3 years, and gunshots meant only one thing: trouble had found its way into his territory. The second shot came closer, followed by a woman's scream that made his blood run cold. He broke into a run, his long legs covering ground with surprising speed for a man of his build. The broad shoulders that could carry a full-grown deer for miles didn't slow him as he vaulted over a fallen log and emerged into a clearing where a scene was unfolding that made his jaw clench hard enough to hurt. A woman with auburn hair falling loose from its pins stood backed against a rocky outcrop, her green dress torn at the shoulder. She held a pistol in shaking hands, pointing it at a wiry man in a dusty suit who was advancing on her with a gold pan still clutched in one hand and a revolver in the other. "Now, Miss Sutton, you're being unreasonable," the man was saying, his voice carrying the oily smoothness of a snake oil salesman. "A woman alone out here needs protection, needs a man to stake a claim on her same as I'm staking claims on this creek. It's only natural. Stay back, Cyrus." The woman shouted, and Quinn could hear the fear beneath her defiance. "I told you I'm not interested. I came west to file my own claim, not to become some man's property." "A woman can't file a claim," Cyrus laughed. "Least not one that'll stick." "But a married woman now her husband could file on her behalf. Think on it practical like." Quinn had heard enough. He stepped into the clearing and his voice came out like gravel grinding together. The lady said no. Both of them whirled toward him. The woman's eyes widened, taking in his full 6'4" height, the breadth of his chest, the way his arms strained the leather of his shirt. The man called Cyrus narrowed his eyes, calculating. "This ain't your business, mountain man," Cyrus said. "This is between me and my intended." "I am not your intended," the woman snapped, though her gun hadn't wavered from Cyrus. Quinn moved closer, and there was something in the way he walked that made even dangerous men step aside. He'd fought grizzlies and mountain lions, had survived winters that killed lesser men, and all of that showed in the confidence of his movements. "You're on my land," he said quietly. "That makes it my business," and the lady's made her feelings clear enough that even a fool could understand. Cyrus's face reddened. "You can't own this land. This is federal territory open to claims." "Tell that to the Lakota," Quinn said. "But that's beside the point. You've got 10 seconds to get out of my sight before I make you leave." "She came to White River to find a claim," Cyrus said, desperation creeping into his voice. "Asked around about gold deposits. I followed her up here to make her a fair offer." "Followed me," the woman interjected. "You've been trailing me for 2 days, making threats, trying to force me to sign papers that would give you rights to any claim I file." Quinn's expression darkened. His hands, large enough to palm a man's skull, flexed at his sides. "That true?" Cyrus must have seen something in Quinn's face that finally convinced him to abandon his pursuit. "This isn't over," he muttered, backing toward the tree line. "There's laws about squatters and claim jumpers, and I'll be bringing the marshal up here to sort this out proper." "You do that," Quinn said. "And while you're at it, tell him about how you've been harassing a woman alone in the wilderness." Cyrus disappeared into the trees, crashing through the underbrush with none of the grace the mountains demanded. Quinn waited until the sounds faded completely before turning to the woman, who had finally lowered her pistol. Her hands were still shaking. "Thank you," she said, her voice steadier now. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along." Quinn studied her in the fading afternoon light. She was perhaps 22 or 23, with intelligent green eyes that met his directly despite the fear he could still see in them. Her dress was expensive but practical, designed for traveling rather than show. The pistol in her hand was well maintained, and from the way she'd held it, she knew the basics of how to use it even if her nerve hadn't quite matched her knowledge. "You're a long way from town," he observed. "And that man was right about one thing: a woman alone up here is asking for trouble." Her chin lifted and he saw the steel beneath the fear. "I'm capable of taking care of myself. Are you?" He gestured to where Cyrus had disappeared. "Because from where I stood, you were about 2 minutes from a very bad situation." Color flooded her cheeks. "I had my gun." "And you were backed against a rock with no escape route," Quinn said bluntly. "If he'd rushed you, could you have pulled that trigger? Put a bullet in a man?" She opened her mouth, then closed it, honesty winning out over pride. "I don't know," she admitted. "I've never had to." Quinn sighed, some of the tension leaving his massive shoulders. "What's your name?" "Sutton. Sophia Sutton Kincaid." She paused. "The Kincaid part is new, I just added it." He raised an eyebrow at that but didn't pry. "I'm Quinn Everhart. I've got a cabin about 2 miles north of here." "You're welcome to stay there tonight, get your bearings, and head back to White River in the morning." "I'm not going back to White River," Sophia said firmly. "I came to find gold, and I'm not leaving until I do." Quinn stared at her for a long moment, taking in the determined set of her jaw, the way she'd squared her shoulders despite everything that had just happened. "You know anything about prospecting?" "I've been reading about it," she said. "Reading," he repeated, and there might have been the faintest hint of amusement in his voice. "You ever panned for gold before?" "No, but I learned quickly." "Do you know what pyrite looks like? What color the water runs when there's real gold deposits upstream? How to read a creek for the best places to pan?" Her silence was answer enough. Quinn shook his head. "Come on. Sun's going down and these hills get cold fast in September. We'll talk more at the cabin." "I don't even know you," Sophia protested, though he could see her eyeing the lengthening shadows with concern. "No," Quinn agreed. "But I just saved you from a man who was fixing to force you into marriage or worse. I could have let that happen if I had ill intentions. Instead, I'm offering you a safe place to sleep and maybe some advice about how not to get yourself killed out here." She considered this, then nodded slowly. "All right, but I'm keeping my gun close." "Wouldn't expect anything else," Quinn said. He turned and started walking, confident she would follow. After a moment, he heard her footsteps behind him. They walked in silence through the pine forest, Quinn moving with the easy grace of someone who knew every rock and root, Sophia picking her way more carefully behind him. He shortened his stride so she could keep up, noting the way she stumbled occasionally over the rough terrain in her traveling boots. "So," he said after a while, "what brings a woman from where are you from?" "Boston," Sophia said. "And I came because I'm 23 years old, unmarried, and according to my family, practically a spinster. My father wanted to marry me off to a business associate who's twice my age and has buried 3 wives already. So I took my inheritance from my grandmother, added my mother's maiden name to mine for a fresh start, and came west to make my own fortune." Quinn glanced back at her. "Most women in your position would have just said no to the marriage." "I did say no," Sophia said sharply. "My father ignored me." In his world, women don't get to make those kinds of decisions. We're property to be traded for business advantages. And you thought the solution was to come to the Black Hills and prospect for gold. I read about Laura Ingalls and Eliza Hart and Martha Maxwell, Sophia said, a defiant note in her voice. Women who made their own way in the West. I thought I could do the same. Those women had skills, Quinn pointed out. Teaching, hunting, naturalism. What skills do you have? Sophia was quiet for a moment. I can read and write. I'm good with numbers. I speak French and a little German. I can paint watercolors and play the piano. Quinn didn't say anything, but his silence spoke volumes. I know, Sophia said quietly. None of that matters out here, does it? Didn't say that, Quinn replied. Just means you've got a steeper learning curve than most. The cabin came into view as they crested a ridge. It was larger than Sophia had expected, built of solid logs chinked with mud and moss. A stone chimney rose from one end, and animal pelts were stretched on frames outside, curing in the mountain air. A small creek ran nearby, the sound of it a constant presence in the clearing. You built this yourself? Sophia asked. Most of it, Quinn said. Had some help from a Lakota man named Tall Bear the first winter. He taught me what I needed to know to survive up here. He pushed open the door, and Sophia stepped inside cautiously. The interior was surprisingly clean, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall. Furs covered a wide bed in one corner, and shelves held supplies, tools, and a surprising number of books. A rough-hewn table and chairs occupied the center of the room, and cooking implements hung near the hearth. It's just one room, Quinn said, moving to build up the fire. I'll sleep outside tonight. You can have the bed. I can't take your bed, Sophia protested. You can and you will, Quinn said firmly. I've slept under the stars more times than I can count. Won't hurt me to do it one more night. He moved around the cabin with economical grace, his large frame somehow not seeming out of place in the confined space. Sophia watched as he built up the fire, pulled out supplies for a meal, and filled a kettle with water from a barrel near the door. Sit, he said, gesturing to one of the chairs. Tell me what you know about gold prospecting. Sophia sat, grateful to be off her feet. I know that gold is heavier than other materials, so it settles in the bends of creeks and rivers. I know you can pan for it by swirling water and sediment in a shallow pan, letting the lighter materials wash away. I know there was a gold rush in California in 1849, and there are still strikes being made in the Black Hills. Quinn nodded as he worked. That's the theory. Reality is harder. This is 1883, and most of the easy gold in these hills is long gone. The big strikes are being made by mining companies with equipment and manpower. Individual prospectors are mostly finding enough to keep them going and not much else. But people are still finding it, Sophia insisted. I heard stories in White River. A man named Jacob Smith found a vein worth thousands just last month. Jacob Smith was an experienced prospector who'd been working these hills for 10 years, Quinn said. He knew what to look for, where to look, and how to tell the difference between a real strike and fool's gold. Do you? Sophia felt her hopes deflating. You're saying I can't do this? Quinn turned from the fire, fixing her with his steady gray eyes. I'm saying you can't do it alone, without training, without experience. That doesn't mean you can't do it at all. Would you teach me? The words came out before Sophia could stop them. Quinn was quiet for a long moment. Why would I do that? Because you're clearly a good man, Sophia said. You saved me from Cyrus. You offered me shelter. You're not treating me like I'm stupid or crazy for wanting to make my own way. You are a little crazy, Quinn said, but there was warmth in his voice now. Coming out here alone, with no experience, no real plan beyond find gold. But that's different from being stupid. He ladled stew into 2 bowls, handing one to Sophia along with a chunk of bread. Eat, We'll talk more after. The stew was surprisingly good, rich with meat and root vegetables. Sophia realized she hadn't eaten since morning and attacked the food with enthusiasm that made Quinn's lips quirk in what might have been a smile. "This is delicious," she said between bites. "Elk," Quinn said. "Shot it 2 days ago. The meat stays good in the cold cellar I dug under the floorboards." They ate in companionable silence, and Sophia found herself studying him in the firelight. He was perhaps 27 or 28, with a weathered face that spoke of years spent outdoors. His hands were scarred and calloused, but he handled his food with surprising delicacy. There was a quiet competence about him that she found deeply reassuring after the chaos of the encounter with Cyrus. "Why do you live up here alone?" she asked finally. Quinn was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he set down his bowl and said, "I came west after the war. Too many memories back east, too many ghosts. Tried my hand at various trades: cowhand, buffalo hunter, scout. Nothing stuck until I found these mountains. Up here it's quiet. Clean. A man can think without the noise of the world drowning out his own thoughts." "You were in the war?" Sophia asked softly. 3 years, Quinn said. "From Antietam to Appomattox, lost more friends than I care to count." He shook his head. "But that's old history. What matters is now." He stood, his full height making him seem to fill the cabin. "I'll teach you," he said abruptly. "About prospecting, about surviving up here, but you have to promise me something." "What?" "You listen to what I say, you don't take foolish risks. And if I tell you something's dangerous, you believe me." Sophia felt hope kindle in her chest. "I promise." "We'll start tomorrow," Quinn said. "I'll show you the basics of panning, teach you how to read a creek. But I'm warning you now, this isn't going to be easy, and the odds of you finding anything significant are slim." "I understand," Sophia said. "Thank you, Quinn. You don't know what this means to me." He looked uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Get some sleep. We'll start early." He gathered some furs and headed for the door, pausing on the threshold. "Bar this behind me, and keep that pistol close just in case." After he left, Sophia did as instructed, sliding the heavy wooden bar into place. She prepared for bed as best she could, washing her face in the basin of water Quinn had left and loosening her hair from its remaining pins. The bed was surprisingly comfortable, the furs soft and warm. Through the single window, she could see Quinn settling down near the fire he'd built outside, his broad back to the cabin as he kept watch. She fell asleep feeling safer than she had since leaving Boston, which seemed impossible given that she was in a mountain cabin with a man she'd just met. But something about Quinn Everhart inspired trust. He'd had ample opportunity to take advantage of her vulnerability, and instead had offered help and protection. That spoke to the quality of his character more than any words could. Morning came with a rooster's crow that shocked Sophia awake. She hadn't even known there was a rooster. She dressed quickly, running her fingers through her tangled hair and pinning it up as best she could without a proper mirror. When she opened the door, she found Quinn already up, tending to a small garden she hadn't noticed in the darkness. "You have chickens," she said, stating the obvious. "6 hens and a rooster," Quinn confirmed. "Fresh eggs, and they're decent company. There's a wash basin by the creek if you want to freshen up. I'll make breakfast." The morning was cold enough that Sophia could see her breath, but the water in the creek was shockingly frigid. She washed quickly, then returned to find Quinn had prepared eggs, more bread, and coffee so strong it could strip paint. "You'll need different clothes," he said as they ate. "That dress won't last a day of real prospecting." Sophia looked down at her green traveling dress. "I have others in my bag. I left it about a mile back when Cyrus started chasing me." "We'll retrieve it after breakfast," Quinn said. But what I mean is you need trousers, sturdy boots, a hat to keep the sun off, working clothes. I don't have any of that, Sophia admitted. Quinn studied her for a moment, then stood and went to a chest in the corner. He pulled out what looked like old clothing, holding up trousers and a shirt. These were mine when I was younger before I filled out. They might fit you well enough. You can cinch the waist with a belt. The idea of wearing men's clothing was scandalous, but Sophia had left Boston propriety behind when she boarded the train west. Thank you. They set out after breakfast to retrieve her bag, Quinn moving with his characteristic silent grace while Sophia tried to memorize the route. The bag was where she'd left it, hidden under a fallen log. Quinn carried it back to the cabin without apparent effort, though it had taken all of Sophia's strength to drag it that far. "What do you have in here?" he asked. "Rocks, books," Sophia said, "and some clothes, personal items, my money." Back at the cabin, she changed into the trousers and shirt Quinn had provided. They fit better than she'd expected, though she had to roll up the cuffs. The freedom of movement was extraordinary compared to her corseted dresses. "Better," Quinn approved when she emerged. "Now you won't trip over your skirts and drown in a creek." He handed her a battered hat that she suspected was also his. It was too large, but he showed her how to stuff the band with cloth to make it fit. Then he picked up 2 gold pans and gestured for her to follow. The creek behind his cabin was clear and fast-flowing, tumbling over rocks worn smooth by centuries of water. Quinn led her to a bend where the current slowed, forming a small pool. "This is where you start," he said, kneeling by the water. "Gold is heavy, heavier than almost anything else you'll find in a creek, so it settles in places where the current slows behind rocks, in the bends and depressions in the creek bed." He demonstrated how to fill the pan with gravel and water, then began swirling it with practiced motions. "You let the water carry away the light stuff, sand, small stones. You keep the heavy material. Takes time and patience." Sophia knelt beside him, filling her own pan as he'd shown. The water was so cold it made her hands ache almost immediately. She tried to copy his swirling motion but sloshed water everywhere. "Slower," Quinn instructed. "You're not making soup. Gentle circular motions. Let the gold do the work of settling." They spent the next hour with Quinn correcting her technique, showing her how to tilt the pan, how to use just enough water, how to recognize the different types of sediment. It was harder than it looked, requiring a delicate touch and endless patience. "This is just practice," Quinn explained. "This creek doesn't have much gold in it, though you might find a flake or two if you're lucky. But you need to learn the basics before we go looking for a real claim." By midday, Sophia's back ached from bending over the creek, and her hands were raw from the cold water. But she'd found one tiny flake of gold, barely visible in the bottom of her pan, and the thrill of it made all the discomfort worthwhile. "I found some," she exclaimed, showing Quinn. He examined it seriously. "That you did. Not enough to buy dinner, but it's a start. Shows you're learning." They broke for lunch, returning to the cabin where Quinn prepared a simple meal of jerky, cheese, and apples. As they ate, he asked, "This man your father wanted you to marry, was he really that bad?" Sophia grimaced. "Reginald Hargrove III. He's 52 years old, owns a textile mill, and has buried 3 wives in 15 years. They all died in childbirth." She set down her apple, appetite fading. "My father sees a business opportunity. I see a death sentence." Quinn's jaw tightened. "Your father would do that to his own daughter." "My father sees women as assets," Sophia said bitterly. "To be invested wisely for maximum return. My mother tried to intervene, but she has no legal power. Everything she owns belongs to him." "So you ran." "I took my grandmother's inheritance before my father could convince me to sign it over to him, and I left. He'll be looking for me, which is why I changed my name. Sophia Kincaid instead of Sophia Sutton. It's not much, but it might buy me some time." Quinn was quiet, turning this information over in his mind. "What happens when your money runs out? I find gold," Sophia said simply. "File a claim, strike it rich, become independent. And if you don't find gold," Sophia met his eyes, "I'll find something, I'll work, I'll save. Whatever it takes, I'm not going back to Boston and I'm not marrying Reginald Hargrove." There was steel in her voice that Quinn respected. "All right then. We'll do our best to make sure you don't have to." They returned to the creek that afternoon, and Quinn began teaching her how to read the water, how to spot the subtle signs that might indicate gold deposits. He showed her fool's gold, iron, pyrite and explained how to tell the difference. He taught her about black sand, about garnets, about all the things that could trick an inexperienced prospector. "The thing about gold," he said as the sun began to set, "is that it's patient. It's been here for millennia and it'll be here long after we're gone. You can't rush it. You have to be just as patient as the gold itself." As they walked back to the cabin in the gathering dusk, Sophia found herself watching Quinn's profile. He'd been unfailingly patient with her all day, never condescending, never losing his temper when she made mistakes. His quiet strength was unlike anything she'd experienced among the men of her Boston social circle. "Why are you helping me?" she asked suddenly. "Really? You could have sent me back to town this morning." Quinn was silent for a long moment. "I guess," he said finally, "because I know what it's like to run from something, and because I respect someone who'd rather face the unknown than accept a life they can't stomach." He glanced at her. "Plus, you remind me a little of my sister." "You have a sister, had," Quinn corrected quietly. "Catherine. She died of fever when she was 19. She was stubborn too, always convinced she could do anything the boys could do, drove our father crazy." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "She would have liked you." They reached the cabin, and Quinn began preparing dinner while Sophia set the table, falling into an easy routine despite having known each other less than a day. Over the meal, Quinn laid out a plan. "Tomorrow, we'll go further afield," he said. "There's a creek about 5 miles from here that I've had my eye on. Never bothered panning it much myself since I make my living from furs and game, but I've seen some promising signs. We'll camp there for a few days, give you a chance to practice in conditions closer to what you'd face if you were really prospecting." "Camp," Sophia repeated. "Unless you think you can walk 10 miles a day on top of hours of panning," Quinn said. "Don't worry, I'll keep watch. You'll be safe." Sophia nodded, excitement and nervousness warring in her chest. This was what she'd come west for: adventure, independence, the chance to prove herself. That it was also exhausting, uncomfortable work didn't diminish her determination. That night, Quinn again slept outside while Sophia took the bed. But as she lay in the darkness, she found herself thinking not about gold or claims or escape from her father's plans. Instead, she thought about the man outside, the quiet mountain man who'd stepped into her life and offered help when he had no reason to. She thought about the way his rare smiles transformed his weathered face, about the strength in his hands that he tempered with surprising gentleness, about the patience he'd shown teaching her throughout the day. She fell asleep to the sound of the creek and the crackling of Quinn's fire outside, feeling something shift in her chest that had nothing to do with gold fever and everything to do with the man keeping watch in the darkness. The next morning dawned clear and cold, perfect weather for their expedition. Quinn packed supplies with practiced efficiency bedrolls, food, cooking gear, mining equipment, distributing the load between 2 packs. He gave Sophia the lighter one but made sure she understood how to carry it properly. "Keep the weight on your hips, not your shoulders," he instructed, adjusting the straps. "And tell me if you need to rest. No point in wearing yourself out before we even get there." They set out with the sun just cresting the mountains, painting the pine forests in shades of gold and amber. Quinn led the way, occasionally pointing out signs Sophia would have never noticed: game trails, edible plants, the marks where a bear had clawed a tree weeks earlier. "You have to pay attention up here," he explained. "The mountains will kill you if you're not careful, but they'll take care of you if you learn their language." They climbed higher into the Black Hills, the terrain growing rougher. Sophia was grateful for the trousers and sturdy boots Quinn had insisted she wear. Her fashionable traveling dresses would have been shredded within the first mile. "How much further?" she asked around midday, trying not to sound winded. "Another hour," Quinn said. He glanced back at her flushed face and slowed his pace slightly. "You're doing well. Most city folk would have quit by now." They stopped for a brief lunch at a mountain spring where the water ran so cold and clear it made Sophia's teeth ache. Quinn refilled their canteens and showed her how to read the landscape, pointing out distant peaks and explaining which valleys were best for hunting, which were too exposed to winter storms, which were sacred to the Lakota and best left alone. "You seem to know a lot about the local tribes," Sophia observed. "They were here first," Quinn said simply. "And they know things about surviving in these mountains that we're still learning. I've got a few friends among them, Tall Bear and his family mostly. They taught me to read weather signs, to find water, to move through the forest without sounding like a drunken buffalo." "Do they mind you being here?" Sophia asked. Quinn's expression grew somber. "Some do, and they've got cause. The government's been pushing them onto smaller and smaller reservations, breaking treaties left and right. But Tall Bear understands that I'm not here to stake claims or bring in settlers. I keep to myself, take only what I need, and respect the land. That's earned me some acceptance." He stood, shouldering his pack. "Come on. We're close now." The creek, when they reached it, was larger than the one behind Quinn's cabin, running swift and clear through a narrow valley. Pine trees crowded close on either side, and rocky outcroppings jutted from the hillsides like broken teeth. "This is it," Quinn said, setting down his pack. "We'll make camp here, and tomorrow we'll start working the creek." He taught Sophia how to set up a proper camp, where to place the fire for maximum warmth and minimum wind, how to string up their supplies to keep them away from bears, how to arrange their bedrolls. By the time they'd finished, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Quinn cooked dinner over the fire while Sophia sat nearby, exhausted but satisfied. Her muscles ached, her feet hurt, and she'd never been so tired in her life. But she'd also never felt so accomplished. She'd hiked 10 miles through mountain wilderness and helped establish a working camp. Her Boston friends would have fainted at the mere suggestion. "Tell me about Boston," Quinn said as they ate. "What was your life like there?" Sophia thought about how to answer. "Suffocating," she said finally. "Every moment planned, every action scrutinized. I attended parties where everyone wore masks of politeness while maneuvering for social advantage. I took painting and music lessons, perfected my French, learned to pour tea and make small talk, all in preparation for marriage to some suitable man who would then control every aspect of my life." "Sounds like prison," Quinn observed. "It was," Sophia agreed. "A comfortable, well-appointed prison, but a prison nonetheless. The worst part was that everyone acted like it was all I should aspire to. My mother tried to warn me, told me to guard my inheritance, to maintain some measure of independence, but even she couldn't imagine actually leaving. But you could. I read about the West in newspapers and magazines," Sophia said, staring into the fire. about wide open spaces and opportunities and women who ran their own businesses, filed their own claims. It seemed impossible, like a fairy tale. But then my grandmother died and left me $5,000. My father wanted me to invest it with him, which really meant sign it over. Instead, I withdrew it all, packed a bag, and bought a train ticket. Quinn whistled low. $5,000. That's a fortune. It's all I have, Sophia said. If I can't make this work, if I can't find gold or establish some kind of income, I'll eventually run out of money and options. Then we'll make sure you find gold, Quinn said firmly. Or figure out something else that works. You didn't come all this way just to fail. The confidence in his voice warmed Sophia more than the fire. Thank you, she said softly, for everything. I know this isn't your problem, but you're treating it like it matters. You matter, Quinn said, then seemed surprised by his own words. He cleared his throat. I mean, everyone deserves a chance to build the life they want, especially someone willing to work for it. They sat in companionable silence as the stars emerged overhead, more stars than Sophia had ever imagined existed. The Milky Way stretched across the sky like a river of light. It's beautiful, she whispered. One of the reasons I stay, Quinn said. Up here, you can see what the world really looks like without all the smoke and noise of civilization covering it up. He showed her how to identify constellations, telling stories he'd learned from both white settlers and Lakota friends. Sophia found herself watching him as much as the stars, noting the way firelight played across his strong features, the way his hands moved when he talked, the rare smiles that softened his usually serious expression. When they finally prepared for sleep, Quinn arranged the bedrolls with his between hers and the forest beyond. Just a precaution, he said. Animals usually stay clear of fire, but better safe than sorry. Sophia lay in her bedroll, looking up at the stars, acutely aware of Quinn's presence just a few feet away. She could hear his steady breathing, feel the warmth from his larger frame. It should have been uncomfortable, sleeping outside with a man she barely knew. Instead, she felt safer than she had in her locked bedroom back in Boston. Quinn, she said into the darkness. Yeah, how long did it take you to stop being afraid out here? He was quiet for a moment. I'm still afraid sometimes, he admitted. Fear keeps you alert, keeps you alive. The trick is not letting it control you. You learn what's a real threat and what's just your imagination working overtime. I'm afraid, Sophia confessed. Not of the wilderness exactly, more afraid that I won't be strong enough, capable enough, that I'll have to go back. You're stronger than you think, Quinn said. You've made it this far, that counts for something. His words settled over her like a blanket, and Sophia felt some of her anxiety ease. She fell asleep to the sound of the creek and the crackling fire, dreaming of gold and mountains and a pair of steady gray eyes that saw her not as property or obligation, but as a person worth helping. Morning came with birdsong and the smell of coffee. Quinn was already up, tending the fire and preparing breakfast. Sophia stretched, feeling the ache of yesterday's hike in muscles she hadn't known she possessed. Ready to learn real prospecting? Quinn asked, handing her a tin cup of coffee. After breakfast, they headed to the creek. Quinn showed her how to identify promising locations, looking for black sand deposits, testing the gravel in different spots, reading the way the water flowed. You're looking for places where heavy material would naturally settle, he explained. Inside bends, behind large rocks, in cracks and crevices in the bedrock. Gold wants to sink, so you go where the geography would let it do that. They worked methodically, Quinn teaching Sophia to sample different locations, to compare results, to build a mental map of the creek's potential. It was painstaking work that required patience and focus. Hours passed with little to show for their effort beyond practice and experience. Then, in a narrow pool behind a large boulder, Sophia's pan revealed something that made her heart race. Mixed in with the black sand were several small flakes of gold, clearly visible against the dark material. "Quinn," she exclaimed. "Look!" He came over, examining her pan carefully. A slow smile spread across his face. "Well now, that's more than just traces, that's actual color." They spent the rest of the day working that location, finding consistent amounts of gold, still small, still just flakes, but enough to prove the creek held promise. By the time the sun began to set, Sophia had collected enough gold to fill a small vial, maybe a few dollars worth. "It's not a fortune," Quinn said, "but it's proof of concept. There's gold in this creek, which means there might be more upstream, closer to the source." That night around the fire, Sophia couldn't stop looking at the vial of gold flakes, marveling that she'd actually found them herself. "I did it," she said, wonder in her voice. "I actually found gold." "You did," Quinn confirmed. "You've got good instincts. Once you spotted that pool behind the boulder, you read it right." Over dinner, they talked about next steps. Quinn suggested they spend another day working the creek, then explore further upstream to see if they could locate the source of the gold. "If you're going to file a claim," he said, "you want to make sure it's on the best possible ground. No point in claiming land that'll play out after a few weeks of work." "How does filing a claim work?" Sophia asked. "You need to mark the boundaries, usually about 300 feet along the creek," Quinn explained. "Then you file paperwork in town with the mining office, pay the fees, and work the claim regularly to maintain your rights. The tricky part is keeping other prospectors from jumping your claim once word gets out that you've found color." "Like Cyrus," Sophia said, her earlier fear returning. "Like Cyrus," Quinn agreed. "Which is why you need to be smart about this. File under your new name, don't advertise what you're finding, and be prepared to defend your claim if necessary." "Defend it how?" Sophia asked nervously. Quinn met her eyes across the fire. "That's something we need to talk about. Are you prepared to really use that pistol if you have to? Because if you file a claim and try to work it alone, eventually someone will test your resolve." Sophia thought about this seriously. "I don't want to hurt anyone," she said slowly. "But I also won't let someone take what I've worked for. So yes, if I absolutely had to, I think I could pull the trigger." Quinn nodded. "Good. Because we're going to spend some time tomorrow on shooting practice. If you're going to carry that gun, you need to be proficient with it." The next day, Quinn set up targets and taught Sophia proper shooting technique. He corrected her stance, showed her how to control her breathing, helped her understand the mechanics of aiming and firing. "Don't just pull the trigger," he instructed, standing behind her with his hands over hers, guiding her movements. "Squeeze it slowly. Let the shot surprise you." Sophia tried to focus on his instructions, but she was acutely aware of his proximity, the warmth of his body behind hers, the strength in his hands. When the gun fired and she actually hit the target, she spun around in excitement, finding herself inches from Quinn's chest. "I hit it," she exclaimed. "You did," Quinn said, and there was something in his eyes as he looked down at her that made Sophia's breath catch. For a moment they stood frozen, the mountain silence wrapped around them. Then Quinn stepped back, clearing his throat. "Try again," he said. "See if you can do it consistently." They spent the morning on shooting practice, and by lunch, Sophia was hitting the targets more often than not. Her shoulder ached from the recoil, but she felt a surge of confidence. She wasn't helpless anymore. She had skills now, knowledge, ability. That afternoon, they packed up camp and hiked further upstream, following the creek toward its source. The terrain grew rougher, the creek narrowing as they climbed. In several locations, they found promising deposits of black sand and gold flakes. "This is good ground," Quinn said, examining one particularly rich sample. "If you filed a claim here, you'd have steady work for months, maybe longer." They made camp that night in a small clearing surrounded by towering pines. As Quinn prepared dinner, Sophia found herself studying him openly, no longer trying to hide her interest. Over the past few days, he'd been unfailingly patient, generous with his knowledge, protective without being overbearing. He treated her as an equal, valued her thoughts, never once suggested she should give up and go home. More than that, she found herself drawn to him in ways that had nothing to do with gratitude. The way he moved with quiet confidence through the wilderness. The rare smiles that transformed his serious face. The strength in his hands that he tempered with surprising gentleness. The gray eyes that seemed to see past her Boston polish to the determined woman beneath. "You're staring," Quinn said without looking up from the pot he was stirring. Sophia felt heat flood her cheeks. "Sorry, I was just thinking." "About what?" "About how different you are from the men I knew in Boston," she said honestly. "They were all concerned with appearances, with saying the right things, with social advantage. You're just yourself. No pretense." Quinn glanced at her. "Not much point in pretense up here. The mountains don't care about your social standing or your fancy words. They only care if you're competent enough to survive." "I like it," Sophia said. "The honesty, the directness. It's refreshing." They ate dinner as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red. The temperature dropped quickly, and Sophia moved closer to the fire, wrapping her blanket around her shoulders. "Cold?" Quinn asked. "A little," Sophia admitted. "I'm still getting used to how much the temperature changes up here." Quinn stood and retrieved another blanket from the packs, draping it around her shoulders. His hands lingered for a moment, and Sophia felt the warmth of his touch through the fabric. "Better?" he asked, his voice lower than usual. "Better," Sophia whispered, looking up at him. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement of the attraction that had been building since they'd met. Quinn's hand came up, almost of its own accord, brushing a strand of hair from Sophia's face. His thumb traced along her cheekbone, and Sophia felt herself leaning into the touch. "Sophia," he said quietly. Should what?" she asked, her heart hammering. "Be sensible. Maintain proper distance." "You're under my protection," Quinn said, though his hand hadn't moved from her face. "I don't want to take advantage of the situation." "You're not," Sophia said firmly. She reached up, covering his hand with her own. "I know my own mind, Quinn. I chose to come west, chose to learn prospecting, chose to trust you. I can also choose this." For a long moment, Quinn studied her face, searching for doubt or uncertainty. Then, slowly, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as if Quinn was still giving her a chance to pull away. But Sophia had no intention of pulling away. She pressed closer, her hands coming up to grip his shoulders, feeling the solid muscle beneath his shirt. Quinn's arms came around her, pulling her against his chest, and the kiss deepened. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Quinn rested his forehead against hers. "This complicates things," he said. "Maybe," Sophia agreed. "Or maybe it makes everything simpler." They sat by the fire for a long time, Sophia leaning against Quinn's chest, his arms wrapped around her. They talked about everything and nothing: his years in the mountains, her life in Boston, dreams and fears and hopes for the future. "What will you do if you find enough gold?" Quinn asked. "I'm not sure," Sophia admitted. "Part of me wants to go back to Boston, show my father that I succeeded without his help, but another part never wants to leave these mountains." "They get in your blood," Quinn said. "The freedom of it, the beauty. Once you've lived up here, cities feel like cages." "Is that how you feel?" Sophia asked. Like you could never go back. Quinn was quiet for a moment. I used to think so. Thought I'd spend the rest of my life alone up here, trapping and hunting and keeping to myself. But lately, he tightened his arms around her. Lately, I'm starting to think maybe there are things worth coming down from the mountain for. Sophia turned in his arms, looking up at his face in the firelight. Quinn Everhart, are you saying you'd leave your hermit life for the right person? I'm saying, Quinn replied, brushing his lips against her forehead, that the right person might make me reconsider what home means. They kissed again, longer this time with growing passion. When Quinn finally pulled back, his breathing was ragged. We should stop, he said. Before I forget myself entirely. What if I don't want you to stop? Sophia asked boldly. Quinn groaned. You're making this very difficult. Good, Sophia said, but she settled back against his chest, content for now with his warmth and presence. They fell asleep by the fire, wrapped in each other's arms under the endless stars. Morning came too soon, but Sophia woke feeling more rested and content than she had in years. Quinn was already up, watching her with an expression that made her heart skip. Morning, he said softly. Morning, Sophia replied, stretching. How long have you been awake? A while. I was watching you sleep. He looked almost embarrassed. You smile in your sleep. Did you know that? Sophia felt warmth flood through her. I was having good dreams. They spent the morning exploring further upstream, finding more promising deposits. By midday, Quinn had helped Sophia identify approximately 300 feet of creek that showed consistent color. This would make a solid claim, he said. Not a fortune, but enough to make it worth filing. The question is whether you want to work it yourself or find a partner. What kind of partner? Sophia asked. Someone with experience who could help you work the claim more efficiently, Quinn explained. You'd split the profits, but you'd also split the labor. Makes the work go faster and provides security. What about you? Sophia asked. Would you consider partnering with me? Quinn looked surprised. I'm not a prospector, I'm a trapper. But you know these mountains, Sophia argued. You know how to read the land, how to survive up here. And you've been teaching me everything I need to know. Why not make it official? Because I don't need gold, Quinn said. I make enough from furs and game to live the way I want. Then don't do it for the gold, Sophia said. Do it because. She hesitated, gathering her courage. Because I need you, not just your knowledge or your protection. I need you, Quinn. His expression softened. Sophia, I know it's fast, she continued. We've only known each other a few days, but I've never felt this way before. Like I can be completely myself, no pretense, no performance. You make me feel strong and capable and valued, and I hope that maybe you feel something similar. Quinn pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. I do, he said into her hair. God help me, I do. I've been alone for so long, I'd forgotten what it felt like to want someone's company. To look forward to the sound of their voice, the sight of their smile. You've turned my quiet mountain life upside down, Sophia Kincaid. Is that a bad thing? She asked, her voice muffled against his chest. No, Quinn said. It's terrifying and wonderful, and I'm not sure what to do with it. But it's not bad. They stood there for a long moment, holding each other in the mountain silence. Then Quinn pulled back, keeping his hands on her shoulders. All right, he said. Here's what we'll do. We'll file this claim in your name. I'll help you work it, teach you everything you need to know to run it yourself. We'll see how things develop between us without the pressure of business partnership complicating it. That seems reasonable, Sophia agreed, though part of her wanted to insist on a formal partnership, wanted some kind of commitment from this man who'd become so important so quickly. They spent the rest of the day marking the boundaries of Sophia's claim, stacking rocks and blazing trees to indicate the territory. It was hard physical labor, but satisfying. By the time they finished, Sophia was exhausted but triumphant. "This is mine," she said, looking at the marked boundaries. "Actually mine." "Pending the paperwork," Quinn reminded her. "We'll head back to White River tomorrow, file the claim properly. Then the real work begins." That night they made camp one final time before heading back to civilization. As they sat by the fire, Sophia found herself reluctant to leave the wilderness, to return to town where Cyrus and others like him might cause trouble. "What if someone contests my claim?" she asked Quinn. "They can try," Quinn said. "But you followed the proper procedures, marked the boundaries correctly. As long as you file the paperwork and work the claim regularly, it's yours by law." "And if someone doesn't care about the law," Quinn's expression grew serious, "then you defend yourself. With words first, with your pistol if necessary. And you won't be alone. I'll be there to back you up." The promise in his words warmed Sophia more than the fire. She moved closer to Quinn, and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her against his side. "I keep thinking this is all a dream," she confessed. "That I'll wake up back in Boston, preparing for another tedious party or another argument with my father about marriage." "It's not a dream," Quinn assured her. "You're here in the Black Hills with a gold claim and a future you're building yourself. That's real." "And you?" Sophia asked. "Are you real, or are you too good to be true?" Quinn turned her face toward his gray eyes intense in the firelight. "I'm real. I'm flawed and scarred and better with animals than people most days. But I'm real, and what I feel for you is real." He kissed her then, deeply and thoroughly, and Sophia felt herself melting into him. His hands tangled in her hair and she pressed closer, wanting to eliminate any space between them. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "We should stop," Quinn said, though he made no move to release her. "Why?" Sophia asked. "We're both adults. We're not hurting anyone." "Because," Quinn said carefully, "if we don't stop now, I won't want to stop at all. And despite what some might think about mountain men, I was raised to respect a woman's reputation." "My reputation is already questionable," Sophia pointed out. "I ran away from home, changed my name, and I'm camping in the wilderness with a man I'm not married to. What's left to protect?" Quinn groaned. "You're not making this easy." "I don't want easy," Sophia said. "I want you." The raw honesty in her words seemed to break Quinn's resolve. He kissed her again, harder this time, with passion that had been building for days. His hands roamed her back, pulling her into his lap, and Sophia went willingly. They made love by the fire under the stars, with a tenderness and passion that left them both shaken. Afterward, wrapped in blankets in each other's arms, Sophia felt tears prick her eyes, not from sadness but from overwhelming emotion. "What's wrong?" Quinn asked immediately, wiping away a tear with his thumb. "Nothing's wrong," Sophia said. "Everything's right. For the first time in my life, everything feels right." Quinn held her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You're remarkable," he said softly. "Brave and stubborn and absolutely remarkable." They fell asleep tangled together, and Sophia dreamed of gold and mountains, and a future she could barely imagine but desperately wanted. The journey back to White River the next morning felt different. Quinn held Sophia's hand as they walked, and they talked about practical matters: how to file the claim, where Sophia would stay while working it, how to balance mining with survival needs. "You can't stay at the claim site full-time," Quinn said. "It's too isolated, too dangerous. You'll need a base in town or nearby where you can resupply, rest, stay safe." "What about your cabin?" Sophia suggested. Quinn was quiet for a moment. "Are you sure? That's a big step, moving in together." "We just spent the night making love under the stars," Sophia pointed out. "I think we're past worrying about propriety." "Fair point," Quinn conceded. "All right, you can stay at the cabin. We'll work the claim together at least until you're confident enough to handle it yourself. And then, Sophia asked. Then we'll figure out what comes next, Quinn said. Together, they reached White River in the early afternoon. The town was small but bustling, with muddy streets and wooden sidewalks. Miners, ranchers, and merchants moved about their business, and Sophia was acutely aware of the curious looks they received a woman in men's clothing walking beside a notorious mountain hermit. The mining office was a small building near the center of town. A clerk looked up as they entered, his eyes widening slightly at the sight of them. "Help you?" he asked. "I'd like to file a claim," Sophia said, stepping forward with more confidence than she felt. The clerk pulled out the necessary forms. "Name, Sophia Kincaid." He wrote it down, then went through the details: location of the claim, marked boundaries, date of discovery. Sophia answered all his questions while Quinn stood nearby, a quiet but imposing presence. When they finished, the clerk stamped the paperwork. "That'll be $15 for the filing fee." Sophia paid from her carefully hoarded funds, and the clerk handed her a copy of the filed claim. "Congratulations, Miss Kincaid. You're now the legal owner of Claim 247 on Willow Creek. Just make sure you work it regularly or someone else can file for abandonment." "I'll be working it," Sophia assured him. As they left the office, Sophia clutched the paperwork like a lifeline. "I did it," she said. "I actually filed a claim." "You did," Quinn agreed. "Now comes the hard part, making it pay." They stopped at the general store to purchase supplies: more mining equipment, food, ammunition. The shopkeeper, a weathered man named McGrath, eyed them with curiosity. "Heard you filed a claim, Miss Kincaid," he said. "Word travels fast in a small town." "I did," Sophia confirmed. "Well, congratulations. And a word of advice: be careful who you trust. Some folks around here aren't too happy about a woman filing claims. Think it's not proper." "Those folks can mind their own business," Quinn said quietly, but there was steel in his voice that made McGrath's eyebrows rise. "Just saying," McGrath replied. "No offense meant." As they loaded their purchases, Sophia noticed a familiar figure across the street. Cyrus stood outside the saloon, watching them with narrowed eyes. When he saw her looking, he touched his hat in a mocking salute. "He's still here," Sophia said quietly to Quinn. "I see him," Quinn replied. "Just ignore him. He can't do anything to you now that you've filed legally." But as they headed out of town, Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that Cyrus wasn't done causing trouble. She mentioned this to Quinn, who nodded grimly. "Keep your pistol close," he said. "And stay alert. Men like that don't give up easy." The walk back to Quinn's cabin took several hours, but Sophia barely noticed the time. She was too busy planning, imagining how she'd work her claim, how much gold she might find, what kind of life she could build. "What are you thinking about?" Quinn asked. "The future," Sophia said. "For the first time, I can actually see one I want. It's exciting and terrifying all at once." Quinn squeezed her hand. "We'll figure it out, one day at a time." Back at the cabin, they settled into a routine. Each morning, they'd hike to Sophia's claim and work for several hours, panning for gold and occasionally finding enough to make it worthwhile. Afternoons were spent on other necessary tasks: hunting, gathering firewood, maintaining equipment. Evenings were for each other. Sophia learned quickly, her initial clumsiness giving way to competence. She could pan efficiently now, raid the creek for promising deposits, maintain her equipment. More than that, she'd grown comfortable in the wilderness, no longer jumping at every sound or fearing the vast silences. Quinn watched her transformation with something like pride. The frightened Boston debutante who'd stumbled into his life had become a capable frontierswoman, comfortable with hard work and simple living. but she'd retained her core strength, her determination, her refusal to let others dictate her path. One evening, about 3 weeks after filing the claim, Quinn broached a subject they'd been dancing around. "What happens when winter comes?" he asked. Sophia looked up from the vegetables she was chopping. "What do you mean? Winter in the Black Hills is harsh," Quinn explained. "Snow can pile 10 feet deep. Temperatures drop below zero. The claim will be impossible to work, and travel between here and town will be dangerous at best." "So we'd have to stay here," Sophia said. "At the cabin." "For months," Quinn confirmed. "Isolated, dependent on what supplies we've laid in. It's not easy and it's not romantic. It's cold and dark and sometimes downright miserable." Sophia set down her knife and crossed to where Quinn sat. She climbed into his lap, facing him directly. "Are you asking if I want to spend the winter with you?" "I'm asking if you're prepared for what that means," Quinn said. "Not just the hardship, but the commitment. If you're here for the winter, you can't change your mind and leave. The snow will trap you until spring." "Good," Sophia said, "because I don't want to leave, not for the winter, not for anything." Quinn cupped her face in his large hands. "Sophia, we need to talk seriously about this, about us." "All right," Sophia said, her heart pounding. "Let's talk." "I love you," Quinn said simply. "I've been trying to figure out how to say it when the right time would be, but there it is. I love you. I love your courage, your determination, the way you face challenges head on. I love how you've embraced this life, how you've changed from a city woman into someone who belongs in these mountains. I love waking up next to you and falling asleep with you in my arms." Tears pricked Sophia's eyes. "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I started falling for you the moment you stepped into that clearing and defended me from Cyrus. You've never treated me like I'm weak or incapable. You've challenged me, taught me, believed in me. You've shown me what partnership really means." Quinn kissed her softly. "Then marry me. Before winter comes, before anything else happens. Be my wife properly and legally. Not because you need my protection or my help with the claim, but because we choose each other." "Yes," Sophia said without hesitation. "Yes, absolutely yes." They were married a week later in White River, with McGrath from the general store and his wife serving as witnesses. Sophia wore a simple dress she'd purchased for the occasion, and Quinn had trimmed his hair and beard, looking almost civilized in clean clothes. The ceremony was brief, conducted by a traveling preacher who happened to be passing through. But when Quinn slipped a simple gold band onto Sophia's finger, a band he'd crafted himself from the gold she'd panned, the moment felt more significant than any elaborate Boston wedding could have been. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the preacher said. "You may kiss your bride." Quinn pulled Sophia into his arms and kissed her thoroughly, not caring who was watching. When they finally broke apart, Sophia was laughing and crying at the same time. "Mrs. Everhart," Quinn said, testing out the name. "I like the sound of that," Sophia replied. They celebrated with dinner at the town's only restaurant, then made the long walk back to their cabin, their home, as the sun set over the mountains. That night, they made love as husband and wife, and Sophia felt a completeness she'd never imagined possible. The weeks that followed were among the happiest of Sophia's life. They worked the claim together, finding enough gold to make it worthwhile while also preparing for winter. Quinn taught Sophia how to preserve food, how to chop and stack firewood, how to mend equipment and maintain their supplies. But it wasn't all work. They also took time to explore the mountains, to swim in cold mountain pools, to lie in meadows and watch clouds drift by. Quinn showed Sophia his favorite places: a waterfall hidden in a narrow canyon, a peak where you could see for miles, a hot spring that stayed warm even when snow fell. "I never knew life could be like this," Sophia said one evening as they soaked in the hot spring. So simple and satisfying. It's not always this peaceful, Quinn warned. Winter will test us, and there will be challenges, injured animals, equipment failures, illnesses. The mountains give, but they also take. We'll handle it, Sophia said confidently. Together. And they did. When an early snowstorm caught them at the claim, they huddled together for warmth and waited it out. When Sophia twisted her ankle on a loose rock, Quinn carried her back to the cabin and tended to her until she could walk again. When a bear got into their food supplies, they worked together to rebuild and better secure everything. Through it all, their bond deepened. They learned each other's habits, moods, quirks. Quinn discovered that Sophia sang while she worked, that she had a wicked sense of humor, that she was stubborn about the strangest things. Sophia learned that Quinn was surprisingly well-read, that he had a gentle touch with injured animals, that he sometimes had nightmares about the war that only her presence could soothe. About 2 months into their marriage, Sophia realized she'd missed her monthly courses. At first, she thought it was stress or the change in lifestyle. But when it happened a second time and she started experiencing morning nausea, she knew. She waited until evening to tell Quinn, choosing her moment carefully. They were sitting by the fire after dinner, Quinn reading one of his books while Sophia mended a shirt. "Quinn," she said, "I need to tell you something." He looked up immediately, alerted by something in her tone. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," Sophia assured him. "At least, I don't think so. It's just, I think I'm pregnant." Quinn stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then a slow smile spread across his face, transforming it. "You're sure?" "As sure as I can be without a doctor confirming it," Sophia said. "I've missed 2 months and I've been sick in the mornings. All the signs are there." Quinn crossed to her in 2 long strides, pulling her into his arms. "A baby," he said wonderingly. "We're going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Sophia asked, searching his face. "Happy," Quinn laughed. "Sophia, I'm terrified and thrilled and I can't quite believe it's real. But yes, I'm happy, so incredibly happy." He knelt before her, placing his large hand gently on her still flat stomach. "Hello in there," he said softly. "I'm your father. I promise to protect you and love you and teach you everything I know about these mountains." Tears streamed down Sophia's face. "We should go to town," she said. "See the doctor, make sure everything's all right." "We will," Quinn agreed, "as soon as the weather permits." "But Sophia, you need to know this changes our plans for the winter. You can't be working the claim in your condition, not with the cold and the hard labor." "I know," Sophia said. "I've been thinking about that. Maybe we could hire someone to work it for us. Or just leave it for the winter and focus on preparing for the baby." "We'll leave it," Quinn said firmly. "The gold will still be there in spring. Our child's safety is more important." They made the trip to White River 2 days later, and the doctor confirmed what Sophia already knew. She was approximately 2 months along, due sometime in late April or early May. "You'll want to be in town for the birth," the doctor advised. "Or at least somewhere with access to help. Mountain cabins are no place for childbirth." But as winter closed in with a vengeance, it became clear that leaving the cabin wouldn't be an option. Snow piled high, blocking the trails to town. Temperatures plummeted. Quinn and Sophia found themselves isolated, dependent on the supplies they'd laid in and Quinn's hunting skills. Sophia's pregnancy progressed through the long winter months. She couldn't work the claim, but she kept busy with cabin tasks, sewing baby clothes from fabric she'd purchased in town, preparing the cabin for their new arrival. Quinn was attentive to the point of being overbearing, insisting she rest frequently, refusing to let her do anything that might be remotely strenuous. "I'm pregnant, not an invalid," Sophia protested one day when Quinn insisted on carrying water from the well. "Humor me," Quinn replied. I've already lost too many people I love. I won't risk you or our child." The vulnerability in his voice made Sophia relent. She understood his fear, knew it came from a place of love rather than a need to control. So she accepted his help, let him pamper her, and focused on growing the life inside her. As winter deepened, they grew closer still. Long evenings by the fire, talking about everything and nothing. Quinn reading aloud while Sophia sewed. Making love with a gentleness that acknowledged her changing body. Planning for the future, what they'd name the baby, how they'd balance claim work with child rearing, whether they'd eventually build a larger cabin. "You ever regret it?" Quinn asked one night. "Leaving Boston, choosing this life?" "Never," Sophia said without hesitation. "This is harder than anything I've ever done, but it's also more rewarding. I'm building something real here, a marriage, a family, a life that's mine. That's worth every hardship." Spring came slowly to the Black Hills, the snow melting in patches, revealing muddy ground and the first green shoots of new growth. Sophia was heavily pregnant now, her belly round and tight. She moved carefully, mindful of her balance, but she was healthy and strong. They made the trek to White River as soon as the trails were passable, wanting to be near the doctor as Sophia's due date approached. They rented a small room above the general store, and McGrath's wife, Sarah, proved to be a godsend, helping Sophia prepare for the birth and sharing her own experiences with childbirth. Sophia went into labor on a warm May morning, just as the first wildflowers were blooming in the mountain meadows. Quinn stayed by her side through the long hours, holding her hand, encouraging her, ignoring the doctor's suggestion that he wait elsewhere. When their son was born, squalling and red-faced and perfect, Quinn wept openly. He held the tiny infant with infinite care, his large, scarred hands cradling the baby as if he were made of glass. "He's beautiful," Quinn whispered. "Sophia, he's perfect. What should we name him?" Sophia asked, exhausted but glowing. Quinn considered. "What about William, after my father? He was a good man. Died when I was 15, but he taught me everything important: honor, courage, kindness." "William Everhart," Sophia tested. "I like it. William Quinn Everhart." They stayed in town for 2 weeks while Sophia recovered her strength, then made the careful journey back to their cabin. William was a good baby, healthy and strong, and he seemed to thrive in the mountain air. That summer, they worked out a new routine. Quinn would spend mornings at the claim while Sophia tended to William and managed the cabin. Afternoons, he'd return and care for the baby while Sophia did some prospecting herself, rebuilding her strength and skills. They were finding good amounts of gold, enough to make the claim worthwhile, enough to set aside savings for William's future. "We should expand," Sophia suggested one evening. "File additional claims on Willow Creek. There's more gold here than one claim can cover." "Expensive to file and maintain multiple claims," Quinn pointed out. "But we could do it," Sophia pressed. "Especially if we hired help. There are men in White River looking for honest work. We could pay them a percentage of what they find." Quinn considered this. "You're thinking like a businesswoman." "I am a businesswoman," Sophia said. "I own a gold claim. I might as well maximize its potential." They talked late into the night, planning and strategizing. By the time they fell asleep, they decided to file 2 additional claims and hire 2 workers to help mine them. It was ambitious, but Sophia's confidence was infectious. Over the next year, their mining operation expanded. They filed the additional claims, hired reliable workers, and established a reputation for fairness and honesty. Sophia proved to have a head for business, negotiating prices for their gold, managing accounts, planning for the future. Quinn handled the physical side of the operation, supervising the workers, maintaining equipment, making sure safety protocols were followed. Together, they built something substantial, not a fortune, but a solid, sustainable business that provided well for their growing family. Because Sophia was pregnant again. Their daughter, Catherine, named for Quinn's late sister, was born in the spring of 1885, a healthy, loud baby who had her father wrapped around her tiny finger from the moment she drew breath. 2 children, Quinn marveled, holding Catherine while William toddled around his feet. I never imagined I'd have a family, never thought I deserved one after everything I'd seen and done. You deserve happiness, Sophia said firmly. You deserve love and family and all the good things life can offer. As their children grew, Sophia and Quinn expanded their cabin, adding rooms and modern conveniences. They became fixtures in White River, respected members of the community. Sophia started a small school, teaching minors' children to read and write. Quinn served as an informal mediator when disputes arose, his reputation for fairness making him a trusted voice. Cyrus had long since left the area, driven out by his own greed and dishonesty. But occasionally, other men would try to challenge Sophia's claims, questioning whether a woman should own mining rights. Each time, Sophia stood her ground, armed with legal documentation and Quinn's steady support. She earned these claims, Quinn would say quietly, filed them legal and proper. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with the mining office. Most backed down when faced with Quinn's imposing presence and Sophia's steely determination. Years passed, measured in seasons and milestones. William's first day of school, Catherine learning to ride. The birth of their 3rd child, a son they named Samuel. The expansion of their mining operation to include a small sluice box operation that dramatically increased productivity. Through it all, Sophia and Quinn remained devoted to each other. They still made time for mountain excursions, for quiet evenings by the fire, for laughter and passion and partnership. The love that had sparked in a mountain clearing had only deepened with time and challenge. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Quinn took Sophia back to the spot where they'd first met. The clearing looked the same, though the trees had grown taller and the memories had acquired a golden patina. I stood right here, Quinn said, pointing to a spot near the rocky outcrop. And I saw you backing away from Cyrus, scared but defiant. I thought you were either the bravest or the craziest woman I'd ever seen. Maybe both, Sophia said, laughing. Definitely both, Quinn agreed. He pulled her into his arms. Thank you. For what? For crashing into my life. For refusing to give up. For loving me despite all my rough edges. For giving me a family and a purpose beyond just surviving. Sophia kissed him softly. Thank you for seeing me, not as property or a problem to be solved, but as a person capable of choosing her own path. Thank you for teaching me to be strong, for supporting my dreams, for building this life with me. They stood in the clearing as the sun set, holding each other close, surrounded by the mountains that had witnessed their beginning and sheltered their family. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't come along that day? Quinn asked. No, Sophia said firmly, because you did come along. You defended me, taught me, loved me. Everything else is just speculation. I love you, Sophia Everhart, Quinn said. More today than yesterday, less than tomorrow. I love you too, Sophia replied. Always. They walked back to their cabin hand in hand, the path so familiar now they could have walked it blindfolded. Smoke rose from the chimney, and they could hear their children's laughter drifting through the evening air. William was 12 now, already showing signs of his father's height and strength. Catherine was 10, with her mother's auburn hair and determination. Samuel was 7, a quiet, thoughtful boy who loved to read. As they approached the cabin, all 3 children rushed out to greet them, full of stories about their day. Quinn scooped up Samuel while Sophia hugged Catherine, and William walked between them, chattering about a fish he'd caught in the creek. Inside, the cabin was warm and welcoming, filled with the evidence of their life together, children's drawings pinned to the walls, books on the shelves, mining equipment stored neatly in the corner, a cradle that had held all 3 babies and might yet hold more. That night, after the children were asleep, Sophia and Quinn sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge. The same stars that had witnessed their first night together, that had shone down on their wedding, that had marked the passing of seasons and years. "Happy anniversary," Quinn said, pulling Sophia close. "Happy anniversary," Sophia replied. "Here's to 10 more years and 10 more after that, and 10 more after that," Quinn agreed. "Until we're old and gray and our grandchildren are working these claims." Sophia smiled at the thought. Grandchildren, a future stretching out before them, full of possibility and promise. It was everything she'd hoped for and more than she'd dreamed when she fled Boston all those years ago. She'd come west searching for gold and independence. She'd found both, but she'd also found something infinitely more valuable: love, partnership, family. She'd found home in the arms of a mountain man who defended her right to belong only to herself first, and then chosen to belong to him freely, completely, joyfully. The mountains had tested them, challenged them, shaped them, but they had endured, not just survived but thrived. Together, they had built a life of substance and meaning, a legacy they would pass to their children and their children's children. As the stars wheeled overhead and the mountain night wrapped around them, Sophia leaned into Quinn's warmth and knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Not because fate or circumstance had placed her there, but because she had chosen it. She had chosen this life, this man, this future, and it was golden,